Seconds. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Truth in All podcast. My mic keeps on falling, but I'm your host, Chris Chastain, as always, and joining me for the very first time on this podcast is Eric Jensen. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm gonna grace this wonderful new show with its first ever piece of breaking news.
Oh, really?
Breaking news! You heard it here first, exclusively on the Truth and All pod. You'll hear this on the End Zone podcast, but it'll be Friday. I got a new podcasting chair, and it is glorious. It leans back, it swivels, it has wheels, it's plush. It looks like I'm a boss at some big law firm. I can kick back. I'm all the way back here, like probably 5-10 feet away from my mic. It still picks up on the mic just fine. And oh man, it's just the most enjoyable thing in the world, Chris, is this great podcasting chair. I love it.
So is it so you got it for podcasting? Let me get that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mainly for podcasting, honestly.
Well,
it's
that reminds me of a story. Well, not really story. Speaking of that news, I broke my chair today, so I'm sitting in a broken office chair today. So
well, maybe it's time a new chair comes into the world, an old chair dies. Maybe it's time to go get a new chair, man. This chair is about 2 days old.
It is time to go get a new chair, and I'm hoping to be able to get one sometime this week or next week, if everything goes through right. But anyway, today we're gonna get into the Pac-12 preview. I know I said before that it was gonna be a week or two, but we decided to go ahead and do it today. Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't even know where I was going to go with that, but anyway, so how? I don't think you need to, but we'll go ahead and do it anyway. Go ahead and tell us about your podcast and stuff. Like I said, I don't think you need to, but go ahead and do it. I think I've done that enough for you, but
well, I mean,
go ahead.
The End Zone podcast is, what can I say? It's an institution. I'm honored. So go check out the End Zone podcast, I guess, at End Zone Pod on Twitter. I'm glad you had me on to talk Pac-12, as a lot of people who have listened to the End Zone podcast will know. I'm not super deep into college football, but I have been diving really deep into the Pac-12, so I think I can come to you today with some decent analysis of my favorite college football league, because the only football team I have that's a lie. The Broncos, of course, are my diehard team that I have deep personal ties to, but really the only football team in my state that, period, and probably right under the Denver Broncos, the team I have ties to the most is the Utah Utes. So I know a little bit about the Pac-12, and I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yep, that's pretty cool. But yeah, be sure to everybody go check out the End Zone podcast. I think it's pretty much everywhere at this point. iTunes, Google Play, whatever. And follow them on Truth and All Pod. And what's your Twitter handle? I can't remember it. It's like Area 18 Utah or something.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. The email that I tried to give, yeah, that's what it is. Anyway, let's go.
The email's backwards. The email's Utah Eric 18.
Yeah, it was messed up. I can't believe I messed that up either. I really can't. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. What are you talking about? Hold on a second. I'm trying to keep my mic up. It really does not want to stay up. All right. But anyway, let's get into it. Pac-12, you were talking about it. You're in love with the Utah Utes. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the first question. Who do you think the best quarterback in the whole conference is?
All right. So there are 3 different kind of routes I believe you can go with here. You can go with the guy who is proven
Hmm.
but average, the guy who's a Heisman candidate trophy, and the guy who's potentially a first round draft pick. Which door do you want to start with?
Um, Let's go down the Heisman road because that one highly interests me.
So the Heisman, that's Khalil Tate.
Hmm.
Khalil Tate out of Arizona is by far the best Heisman candidate at QB in the conference. And I mean, he struggles with throwing the ball. He's not the best pure quarterback, but he is a fantastic athlete. He is basically a third running back. Arizona runs a ton of option with him. He's gonna make plays with his legs. He's got the mobility of a running back, the power of a running back, the size of a running back. Um, He's a run first quarterback. He struggles with accuracy a little bit, but he can still make some of the throws. I don't personally like him because I watch a lot of NFL and I like my college quarterbacks to look NFL ready, and he is the least NFL ready Heisman quarterback there is. Um,
Which,
but he should be exciting to watch.
yeah, which when you look at it, the Heisman is really going to be based off stats, and he's going to have probably, I would say, at least 1,000 probably rushing yards. I think, and that will probably be one of the factors. It's not the Heisman, like you said. It's not going to mean just because he wins the Heisman does not mean he's NFL ready at all. He's not going to be the Baker Mayfield type quarterback at all. So yeah, I would agree with you there. He's gonna, if any of these quarterbacks could win the Heisman, excuse me, it's him. But let's go to general. Who you think the best quarterback is?
Just in general, it's Jake Browning out of Washington. He's the most experienced of a bunch back when Washington had that playoff run 2 years ago. He was the guy behind that team. He took a little bit of a step back last year, but was still really good. He's Washington's record holder for passing yards. He doesn't have the best arm strength, but he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and he's a good pocket passer.
Right. Um. Yeah. I wouldn't disagree with you there either. I don't, like I said earlier. I don't, just because he could win the Heisman doesn't mean I don't think uh, Tate would be is the best quarterback. So I just want to make sure that's pretty clear. And now what was your other? You had three different
Yeah,
doors.
so a
What's
sleeper here for the best quarterback in the
okay?
Pac-12, and a guy I think could be a first-round talent if he performs well this year and he fixes his accuracy a little bit is Justin Herbert out of Oregon. The guy can win from the pocket. He can. He's still got the mobility though. A lot of the plays he's a rollout quarterback, but he's never going to he's never going to run first.
Right.
He reminds me a little bit of like kind of what Deshaun Watson has become in the NFL, a guy who does a lot of play action, a lot of rollout, read type passes. He's got a tremendous arm. He can make all the throws, but he really struggles with his accuracy, which he'll need to change if he wants to have an NFL career. But Justin Herbert's a really interesting guy who could, if he doesn't fix his accuracy, kind of be a really good college quarterback. But if he gets the accuracy underway, he has the tools to be a first round pick in the NFL draft next year.
Yeah, and yeah, I won't disagree with that either. I don't know. Pac-12 is probably my least knowledgeable league, just because I don't really. Nobody like in the area plays Pac-12, so it's just one of those things. I don't really. That's my least knowledgeable conference. But anyway, so yeah, I can't disagree with any of those. let's move on. Let's talk about running backs in the Pac-12. Who's the best
All
one?
right. I mean, it's no contest here. It's Bryce Love.
I would agree.
Khalil Tate, like you could definitely say that he's a Heisman candidate, but if there's a Heisman favorite out of a Pac-12, it should be Bryce Love. He was in the running for it last year. This guy's a top 10 pick in next year's draft, like no doubt in my mind. He runs like Ezekiel Elliott and has the power and size of Leonard Fournette. He is the best running back the Pac 12 has seen in a really, really long time. He's a downhill runner. He can work in the passing game. There are just a ton of things that Stanford can do with him. He's the focal point of Stanford's offense, and honestly, the reason why they were able to sniff a bowl game last year. He is no doubt the best running back in the conference. It isn't really, it's not even really close. I mean, I like Utah's running back, Zach Moss. I'd say he's probably the second best in the conference, but it's not close with Bryce Love. He is by far the best running back in this conference.
Yeah, and there's really no doubt about that. And he may be the best running back in the entire college football. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's really no question there to me either. So there we go. We agree on one. We agree 4 out of 4. Well, now let's kind of move on to the defense. Which team has? Now we know the Pac-12 isn't really as known for defense, should I say? So which defense do you think will be the best?
Well, I'd highly disagree with that. I think that the Pac 12 has a different style of defense, yes, but I certainly do think that they have some really good defenses, and it's got to be the Utah Utes. The Utes have the best defensive line in the conference, in my estimation. Their linebacking core is a little bit weak, and they have the second best defensive back core. They don't house as many superstars as Washington does, but whereas Washington has real weaknesses at their linebacking core and, at their, well, I don't know. It's tough. It's a little bit of a bias because Washington has more talent, but it's younger. Utah has a bunch of returning starters that played pretty well last year, that if they can take the next step can be the best defense in the conference. And as I just pull up their roster here really quick, I really don't think there's a lot of debate to be had. Bradley Anae is insane. He played really well last year. Cornerback Julian Blackman is a first-round talent at corner. And Kerryon Ballard is also a guy who could be taken in the first 3 rounds of a draft at safety. I think the Utes have the most proven and best coached defense, and that's why I think they're the best defense in the league, followed closely by Washington, but who has the best secondary in the league. But I really do think losing Vita Vea is going to hurt them a lot in their pass rush.
So you think he's the difference between Utah being the best defense and Washington being the best defense?
Yeah, Washington lost one of their best players to the draft in Vita Vea, and Utah didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. Speaking of Utah, and we'll actually expand this so far that you can pull up their schedule if you want to, because I didn't say anything about this. But how many games do you think they win? And
I'm gonna save that for later because I have that in my top 5.
Okay, yeah. Then we'll okay, yeah, that's fine. We'll move on then. Hold on a second. I'll cut this out because I gotta find out which question I was gonna ask next. Kind of threw me off. Okay. So which team out of the Pac-12 North, and we'll do the South in just a minute, do you think has the best chance to win the division or the
Oh, it's
conference? The
Washington.
conference, excuse me.
Oh, it's Washington, and it isn't even close. The Pac-12 North is so weak right now. Oregon State and Washington State are rebuilding or whatever. It's not going well for either of them. Cal is really struggling. Stanford might be a dark horse, but really outside of Bryce Love and a pretty talented defensive line, they really struggle at other positions. Oregon is a team that lacks any semblance of a defense
Yeah.
and might challenge if the offense can put up a lot of points, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I trust Justin Herbert that much. So I think it's clearly Washington.
And yeah, and we'll get into this a little bit. I think Stanford's at best 9-3 team. They got a tough schedule, but anyway, let's kind of move. And let's do that.
Why do you think it's Stanford?
What's that?
Why do you think it's Stanford?
No, I said I think Stanford at best wins 9 games.
Okay.
That's what I meant. They have a tough schedule, but we'll get into that in a little bit because I don't know if you have them in your top 5. But anyway, what about the South? Who's got
the South is
yeah.
The South is much more competitive. USC is still very good despite losing Sam Darnold. JT Daniels, a freshman, is going to be asked to do a lot, but he has a lot of great pieces around him. Still, the offensive line didn't really lose anyone. Their wide receiving core had a very strong recruiting class. They're going to have to find someone to replace Ronald Jones II at running back, but they have a very good defense as well. Chip Kelly joining UCLA makes that team instantly exciting to watch. I think they're going to be a lot better than people think. I think they're going to win some games that might surprise people this year. Pull a few upsets. I like UCLA in the South. Arizona has the Heisman candidate with Khalil Tate and a pretty well-rounded defense. Utah is the most well-rounded team in the division. It isn't star-studded, but there are no weaknesses on it, and you get a very competitive division with this. Right now, I have to say Arizona or USC probably. I'd lean more with Arizona because of Khalil Tate.
Right.
Utah does people really like Tyler Huntley. I don't. That's Utah's quarterback. Utah doesn't have the QB in my mind, and they always seem to choke during the big games. So we'll get to that later, but they have a very winnable schedule, and they should be the best team in this division. But at the same time, I think I'd still have to go with Arizona at the moment because I know that Utah might choke 1 or 2 games along the way.
Well, one thing you didn't talk about, and maybe on purpose, Arizona State.
Yeah, Arizona State is a little bit weird. They got Herm Edwards as a coach, and he decided to kind of sit back and really do nothing. They have the worst recruiting class in the entire Pac-12. They just kind of, I don't know, it's hard to describe. They sat back and didn't really add anyone to a team that really surprised a lot of people last year. I think that Manny Wilkins, their quarterback, has a chance to advance a little bit in his second year. But
so we're talking 6-6 type team, right?
Yeah, about that. They're good enough to make a bowl for sure, but they certainly shouldn't be considered contenders. Kind of a dark horse that I didn't mention, that if they get hot, they could be very good, is Colorado. They have capitalized on a lot of good recruiting classes. They have a really good offense if Steven Montez, their quarterback, can play to his full potential. He's shown some really nice flashes. Colorado could be a team that we're talking about in like mid-October as a 5-win team who's looking for a big, highly ranked Pac-12 team, and maybe they get an upset, and maybe they're in the discussion for that for the division at the end of the year. The South is very, very tight, and is probably going to be, if there's a reason that the Pac-12 doesn't get any teams into the playoffs, it'll be the South, because there are just so many top-heavy teams there that they'll end up knocking each other around so much that no one's going to end up undefeated.
Right.
The Pac-12 is weird like that, unlike the SEC or the ACC, where you have these powerhouse teams who come out and just dominate everyone, like Georgia and Alabama. You have these really good teams in the Pac-12, but because every team usually in one division is so stacked, they just end up clobbering each other throughout the year. It's the same thing in basketball. They win outside of conference, but they can't really put it together inside a conference just because every team has a shot to win every week. So the South's a little bit harder for me to pick, but I'd probably go with the best. The best shot realistically is Utah. So if I had to pick like a Pac-12 title game, it'd probably be Utah-Washington. But
You want to pick
Utah. Utah has a problem with giving away big games, and so it might be Arizona-Washington. But it's either Arizona, USC, or Utah.
Okay, so
It's really too close to call.
yeah, I see that. Yeah, I think that division will be much more competitive than the North. That's for sure. I'm pretty sure we all agree with that. Well, both of us agree with that because, like you said, these teams aren't really. Three of those teams aren't going to be They're going to be competing for a 6-6 spot and going to a bowl game. So, but yeah, I was going to ask who's winning the conference, but I think the next question will kind of answer that. So, from 1 to 5, we'll start. We want to start with 5 or 1 when we go through the top 5 teams.
Whatever you want to do.
I'm thinking. Let's start with 5. Yeah, let's go 5 to 1.
Okay. So 5 for me is Stanford. I think they're going to go 6-6. They've got a really tough schedule, but also a really talented game and a decently talented team. Notre Dame, they're going to lose to Notre Dame, USC, San Diego State, UCLA, Utah, and Washington, but they can get other wins along the way.
I'm quite surprised that you think they're going to lose to San Diego State.
San Diego State's a good team this year again, so I wouldn't underestimate them.
Yeah, that's fair. And so 5 would be Stanford at 6-6 is what you said, and let's go to 4. Who do you got at 4?
4, I think, is USC. 8-4. I have them losing to UCLA, Notre Dame, ASU, and Texas. USC, JT Daniels is an unproven freshman. The ASU game is on the road, and USC is always due for an upset usually, that's going to be it. Texas is going to be much better this year. So is Notre Dame. USC's got a really, really tough schedule. So I think they'll go 8-4, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did better.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they went 7-5 either. Just because I don't think the quarterback spot's proven enough, and I would definitely say it's possible they go 7-5. I don't think it's any worse, and I would agree. If I were to have to predict it, I would say 8-4 too. So Let's move on to number 3. Who do you got at 3? I have a feeling I know who it is, but you can go ahead.
Arizona.
Oh, really?
I have Arizona at 3, at 8-4 with losses to
Wow.
Utah, Arizona State University, Houston, and UCLA.
Really? So
Yeah.
you think they're going to do horrible in their division?
Uh,
Because you
the,
have
the ri- the rivalry game, ASU has had the edge the last few years. I think they're going to stick with that. Houston's got Ed Oliver, one of the top defensive players in college football, apparently, plus a pretty decent offense still. UCLA, I really like what Chip Kelly's doing with them. Uh, I'm not sure if they're going to win a lot of games, but I know they're going to get some big wins. And the Utah game's in Utah, and that's a tough place to win at.
wow.
That's why they have the 4 losses.
Which means that there's no chance that they're not winning that division. In that case,
No.
Uh,
No.
all right. Well, let's go to number 2. Maybe I'll be right about this one. Who you got number 2?
2, I have Utah. 2, I have Utah. But don't get me wrong. They're going 10-2, and that looks good. But here's a problem. They probably won't, even if they're 10-2 going into that bowl game, they probably won't have a shot to contend for a playoff spot because their out of conference schedule is so weak. They play Weber State, Northern Illinois, and I believe
BYU.
BYU, who, depending on how BYU plays, that's always a big question mark. They have a really weak out of conference schedule. In the Pac-12, I think they can win a lot of games. I think they'll lose to USC because that's a game they consistently lose. And I think they'll lose to Washington.
Okay.
If they could somehow figure out how to go 11-1 and beat Washington, I think there is a good chance they could be considered for a playoff team, but I still wouldn't bet on it. And I wouldn't bet on them going 10-2 either. I just think the way their schedule plays out, they play a lot of really weak Pac-12 North teams, and that's where they're going to get a lot of their wins from. They don't have a super strong schedule, so I think that Utah goes 10-2. I think at worst they're about a 9-win team.
Yeah, I think at worst you're at worst is pretty fair, and that's probably the 9 wins is probably where they'll be at. I don't know if they'll reach 10 wins.
But honestly, like if Utah somehow went 12-0, like I would not be surprised. Like they have a they have a really weak schedule, and if they can beat Washington, then I don't know. But I honestly don't think a 12-0 Utah would make it into the playoffs. But the schedule's just too weak. They don't. Depending on where Arizona, USC, and Oregon rank, and where Washington ranks, they're just gonna have the Utes are really gonna have to hope that the Pac-12 gets a lot of top 25 teams, and they run into them when they're at their best standing, so they can get upsets and move up. Because if that isn't the case, then the team stands no chance of making it into the Final Four, just because the schedule is so weak.
Yeah. Well, even if they were to go 11-1 or 10-2 at worst, I don't think 10-2 will work. But if you go 11-1, as long as you don't lose to BYU or those first 2 games, you might be all right. As definitely
No. I think you have to be. I think you have to be Washington. You have to beat Washington if Utah really wanted a serious chance of being in the in the conversation. I think a loss to Arizona or USC wouldn't hurt them as much if they had a Washington win. And I don't think any of the out of conference losses would hurt as much if they were able to beat Washington somehow.
Yeah, well, like you said, they have to win. They have to win 11 games if they're wanting in, at bare minimum, bare minimum. And like you said,
They have to go undefeated if they want in, realistically.
I think if you lose to a top 10 Washington or Arizona or not USC because they're not going to be a top 10 team, but Washington or Arizona, if they go really good and finish it, or if they go top 10, I think there's a chance if you lose to one of them, and you have to win the conference.
But the flip side of this, of the super easy schedule, is this: like Kyle Whittingham has been on the hot seat for a while. If they win 8-4, I think they would fire Kyle Whittingham. Just because the schedule is so weak. There's no excuse why they can't be an 11-1 or 10-2 team. That's just how weak it is. If you lose to Arizona, USC, or Washington, that's acceptable. Any other team isn't.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and that's the best way to put it. And I don't even think Stanford will be in that conversation. But yeah, yep. So let's move on. We've kind of covered a lot of the Utah Utes. Who's the number one team?
Yeah, so my number one has to be Washington. I think that's pretty much a no-brainer of what we've talked about thus far. The best well-rounded team in the conference, but I think they're going to go 11-1. They've got a primetime game against Oregon, kind of mid-season, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest college football upsets of the year. I don't know. That I have Washington number one overall.
Yeah, that's very fair, and I could see that probably happening. And you have Utah and Washington in the conference finals, right?
Yeah,
Most likely.
I think Washington is probably going to win that match. Would probably win that matchup.
All right, cool. Well, do you have any other thoughts on the Pac-12 as a whole?
Yeah, I really don't think any of the Pac-12 is going to get into the college football playoffs. I honestly don't think they have a chance, like, at all, just because the media coverage is so anti-Pac-12, I feel like.
Right.
And I don't know. I just the teams beat each other up too much, but I'm still really excited to watch the conference. There's a lot of NFL talent, especially offensive line and defensive line wise, that could come out of this talent on teams like Utah and Washington. And Zach Moss is a guy to watch as a kind of sleeper running back who could emerge this year. Bryce Love is some great NFL talent. And then if Justin Herbert can play to his full potential, he's potentially a first-round draft pick. So there's some exciting players to watch in this conference for sure, but I'm not entirely sure any one of these teams is going to make the playoffs. What do you think?
I don't think so either, and of course, if one were to, it'd be Washington. I would agree with you there, because I do think they'll go 11-1, well 12-1, because they'll probably beat, if in this situation they beat Utah or Arizona. I think they could beat any of those teams. I really do. I think it would take for a team in the Pac-12, and that's any of these teams, Stanford, UCLA, Arizona, Utah, or Washington State. I don't think they're in the conversation, but if they were, I think
Washington State is not in the conversation.
I know they were last year.
After losing Luke Falk this year, I would be shocked they won more than 5 games this year.
Yeah, and I think that's very fair. And that's why I was saying if we were even considering them. But anyway, any team from the Pac-12 is going to have to go undefeated. I really believe that, and it's kind of unfortunate. Just because that's the way it's worked here lately.
That week 1 game against Auburn for Washington is going to be huge, because if somehow, some way, and I do think Washington is going to win that game, Washington wins that game and is able to keep the momentum going and win every other game in the season, I think Washington could end up as the 1 or 2 team, but they have to beat Auburn week 1, and then they have to go undefeated. If they lose to Auburn week 1,
You can forget it.
It looks pretty bleak for the Pac-12 if Washington loses in week 1, because that's their best chance to the playoffs. And if Washington loses to Auburn, it's over.
Yeah, I think,
and that's just in week 1.
yeah, and I would agree with you there. I think, but just because of how good Auburn or how highly ranked Auburn's probably going to be, because they're probably going to be top 15 at worst, I would think. So yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. That they're gonna have to win. That's basically a must-win game. Uh, unfortunately, just for not just for Washington, like you said, for the whole Pac-12. Um, well, I think that's pretty much all we had to cover. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it.
I think we covered Pac-12 pretty darn well. Well, thanks for joining me, Eric. You'll be back with me for the SEC preview, which will come out next week. And I'll be going on your podcast a few times, I'm pretty sure, over the next few weeks. So just keep on listening to both of the podcasts, and yeah, we'll keep on. Like I said, thanks for joining me, Eric, and I'll talk to you all next time. Of course, you can follow me at Chris C_01, the podcast at Truth and All Pod. Follow Eric at Eric18Utah, or the End Zone Pod. On all of those are on Twitter. So till next time, peace out.